Now we've talked quite a bit about soil and nutrients, fertility, especially organic matter. I'm going to touch on some basics of cover cropping. And this is kind of what I'm going to say right now is just kind of a farmer coming out in me. I'm not an organic grower, but I do understand the importance of bringing organic matter into your soil and maintaining that organic matter. I've tried hauling in manures, compost, and a lot of things, bringing in a lot of stuff to mend my ground. It turns out the material itself may not be that expensive, but the hauling is, and the incorporation, and the amount of it that you need to make a difference is incredible. The thing that I've turned to on my farm is mostly cover cropping to actually bring nutrients, i.e. nitrogen, to the farm, but also improve the fertility of the soil and the physical characteristics of the soil, along with the biotic characteristics of the soil. Again, organic matter that's being broken down by microorganisms it provides food or a substrate for the microorganisms. The microorganisms in soil cycle nutrients from the organic matter and make it become more available to the plant. Classic example of this is mycorrhiza and its effect of making phosphorus available to the plants. Also, the microorganisms in the soil have a tendency to competitively exclude pathogenic organisms that might negatively affect the plants. And the competitive exclusion is an idea that it's very prevalent in the animal science arena, and even in human nutrition, when you're talking about eating yogurt that has beneficial microorganisms that populate the gut and basically squeeze out any of the pathogenic organisms. And it's kind of the same concept with it in plants and in the soil. One of the other things, as we know, that organic matter and cover crops can do is increase soil fertility. One of the things I'd like to point out is that fertility, there's a difference between nutrient content of the soil and fertility. Just because the soil is fertile doesn't mean it necessarily has nutrient content. It more likely will, but there are two different things. Fertility is an actual presence or non-presence of charged particles within the soil. Charged particles occurs in two different forms: permanent and non-permanent. There are certain size clay particles that have negative charges that can hold plant nutrients, and there are negative charges in organic matter, humus. However, the fertility from decomposed organic matter is not permanent. To maintain that fertility or raise it, you have to keep adding organic matter into the soil. Some things that cover crops can do, they can add nitrogen in case legumes. They can scavenge and store nutrients that are present in the soil. One of the cover crops that does this very well is a tillage radish, which can send a small taproot way down even into the subsoil and pull up nutrients such as phosphorus and bring it up in the plant mass, going when it decomposes, it leaves those nutrients available for the next crop. Trapping the nutrients in the biomass of the plants. Say you put on some manure or fertilizer in the fall, it's probably not going to be used until the following season. You don't want that fertilizer to go anywhere. Put a cover crop on it, tie up those nutrients, and have them available for the spring crop. Cover crops can be used to suppress weeds, both physically and chemically. Some cover crops have an allelopathic effect or have chemicals that prevent other plants from growing and interfering with your cropping system. You hear a lot about IPM now in agriculture. One of the things that I feel that cover crops can do, you can integrate them very well into IPM strategies for controlling weeds, insects, and soil-borne diseases. Another thing that we mentioned earlier that cover crops can do is reduce the soil-borne diseases and nematodes. We talked a little bit about biofumigation. The cover crops can also provide habitat for beneficial insects. Again, organic matter in soil is going to improve soil structure, can help reduce compaction, promote soil aggregation, which will benefit the root, water, and air infiltration in the soil. The cover crops and organic matter improve soil till. And this is not only good for the plant itself, creating a happier environment for the root environment for the plant, but also it has can have a direct economic effect on you, your soil structure. If you have a nice, loose, tilthy soil and you're using machinery out there to work that soil, it's going to take probably a lot, it's going to cause a lot less wear and tear on your equipment, and it's probably going to take a lot less fuel to do the same amount of work in that field. When you're looking at cover cropping, you want to assess what are the priorities that you want to happen. What job do you want that cover crop to do? You want organic matter, nitrogen, weed suppression, erosion control, a lot of things. You may have multiple jobs for one cover crop to do. Don't think in terms of just planting one crop, but there's a lot of benefits to mixing up and planting several species of cover crop in the field. Consider your crop rotation and planting schedules. One of the main challenges that I see with cover cropping, especially intensive cover cropping, is finding fallow windows in which you can grow that crop, make it do the job you want it to do, get it incorporated, and then get your economic crop on top of it. With strawberries, this is very important because if you're laying beds, your bed quality is very important. And if you have undecomposed plant matter in the soil that affects the quality of your bed, that's going to potentially affect the growth and quality of your strawberry crop. Cover cropping in high tunnels is very similar, same principles that happen outside, but there's a few things I'd like to point out about it. The nature of the high tunnel, it gives you an advantage of growing crops. It also gives you an advantage of growing cover crops. You can achieve faster growth, possibly higher biomass in a shorter period of time. You can control the water if need be. have some control of temperature. You can extend the cover crop farther into the season if you wish, or start it earlier in the season. One thing I'd like to point out though, anytime you're using high tunnels, we're generally using irrigation in there, is we basically have created a desert environment, and you really have to watch the salt build up in the soil. Generally after 3 years, rule of thumb is after 3 years, you've got to do something in the high tunnel to decrease the salinity buildup. Again, cover crops in the high tunnel can attract beneficial insects. But on the other hand, especially with strawberries, they can also harbor unwanted pests and insects. We've talked a little bit about biofumigation already. We get biofumigant brassica crops such as Indian mustard have biofumigation properties. As I mentioned earlier, biofumigation is most effective if biomass is tilled under, watered, and covered as quickly as possible with plastic. You got to have ample moisture, again, maybe recommend about an inch of rainfall equivalent. One thing this gentleman right here mentioned is when he was weed eating the brassica crop, didn't want to get it on your arms. You also don't want to breathe the gas. It's basically mustard gas, especially in a high tunnel where it's a fairly enclosed situation. You probably need to use a respirator. Matter of fact, the boss there makes it mandatory that we use a respirator when we're working with those crops in the tunnel. Kind of getting back to strawberries here, there's a few things that we've done in the high tunnels, cover crops. Generally, we're having strawberries in the tunnel September through May. We try to cover crop May through July, till it, destroy the crop, pulverize it, solarize July through August. Some of the things we're trying to accomplish with the cover crops, again, add organic matter, improve the soil tilth, add nitrogen. 2012, we put cowpeas in. We started out with a fairly low level of nitrogen. For whatever reason, it was maybe 40 or 50 pounds. At the end of the season, before planting strawberries, we had nearly 300 pounds per acre of nitrogen. I don't know if it all came from the peas, but I know a lot of it had to have. Again, weed suppression, biofumigation. We've done experiment again in 2011 with actual biomass of white mustard and mustard seed meal. One other thing that we've done, talking about too much nitrogen, is we've used Sudan grass during the summer and actually harvested the Sudan grass, took it out of the tunnel to remove excess nitrogen. This is a picture. We just sowed some cowpeas and the ground was real dry in the tunnel. We set up sprinklers, watered them in real well. Here's some solarization that we put down. We got the biofumigation materials under there. One thing we'd like to point out here is that the first year we did high tunnel strawberries, we put a cover crop between the rows. Well, we found out in a hurry that this probably wasn't a good thing. Strawberries do not play well with other plants. And what we found was, first, this white clover crowded the beds and was actually crowding the strawberries. The other thing it was doing, it was transpiring a heck of a lot of moisture into the air. And this was a problem whenever it started getting cool and we were keeping the sides down to maintain heat. We basically created a rainforest in there and started having a lot of problems with botrytis, fruit rot, and some other diseases. The other thing was, since this is warm during the cool part of the year, it's an oasis for insects. And we basically just provided them this clover was basically a condominium for crickets and worms and all sorts of insects. Other thing is that I realized from Dr. Johnson that clover attracts mites, spider mites, and you don't want spider mites in strawberries. Right before planting and making your beds in your field, something that you might want to consider. If you haven't done it before, you may want to consider mechanical subsoiling to improve the internal drainage of the soil. Again, strawberries do not like wet feet. You'll want to incorporate your cover crop or biofumigant well ahead of time to make sure it gets decomposed to the level which facilitates better bed making and allows those nutrients to become available to the plant. I would definitely recommend soil sampling again as close to bed formation or planting. If you need to adjust your nutrients a little bit more, you can do it at that time. Especially if you're using mechanical bedding equipment, it's a must that the soil has to be tilled very deeply. What I like to do is, before I go out in the field and start laying beds, if I can stick my hand in the soil 8 to 10 inches fairly easily, it's more likely good enough to bed up. Talking about bed laying, we do some of it here at the university in the high tunnels by hand. We don't do it unless we have to, but yeah. But if you're doing it by machine or hand, here's some tips that will help you. Ideally, if the soil can be moist but not wet, you're going to form a tighter, better bed. Make sure the soil is deeply worked, as free as possible from clods, rocks, and plant debris. Minimum on a bed for strawberries, ideally, would probably be 24 inches across. It would be ideal if you could get that bed 6 inches high. We don't always get the height in the high tunnels, but again, though, we're using equipment here that is vegetable bedding equipment that makes a smaller bed. A commercial strawberry bed will be 8 to 12 inches high and probably 30, 32 inches across. And it's going to have a slight crown to it, like a roof. And so any water that gets on there is going to run off and will not stand on top of that bed and cause diseases such as botrytis and maybe even anthracnose and several others to get a hold. Beds should be firm and not packed. A rule of thumb that I use is you can go up, put your weight on the bed, top of the bed before you cover it with plastic. And if you can get about a ½ inch depression in the bed and not sink down, that's probably a good bed right there. Soft enough for the plants, but it's still good and packed. Want to try to put your drip irrigation line about 2 inches under the surface of the bed if possible. If you're using T-tape, always remember that the emitters go up, whether you're laying it by hand or whether you're applying it with a machine. Bed quality, including how you lay the mulch and the mulch is stretched over the surface of the bed, is extremely important. The better, closer contact you can have with the mulch to the bed, the more efficient that heat is going to transfer into the soil mass of that bed and promote the root growth of those plants and promote the growth of the plant. And this is extremely important in the fall because when we plant most of our strawberries, because you have a limited amount of time to grow grow that plant, and you are dealing with a limited amount of heat units coming from the sun, because usually from October to the middle of December is the crucial time to build that plant, and thus build and set your production for the following spring.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If you're machine laying this with the tape and the mulch all at the same time, how in the world are you going to get your drip tape 2 inches deep?
Subsurface applicator.
We have a little film clip here to show.
Yeah. And we've got that equipment out here too.
Okay.
So, I'll go back.
Okay.
I just want to point this out right here. If you've never laid mulch before, make sure that when you pull that mulch over, you're getting adequate coverage on the edge. Because you'll make a big old long row, and if there's a 10-foot piece that's not covered, you got a wind out here, you'll be redoing that row. Trust me. This is forming up some beds right here.
Now, this was a vegetable bed or over there?
Yeah, this is our vegetable bed. And what I've talked to a lot of people when they're pulling their beds and making their beds, you're going to probably have to make more than one pass to get that bed, enough soil in that bed, and make a pack. I've talked to some people who went through and they said, well, we just made one pass. We couldn't figure out what's wrong. The bed didn't fill, and we planted strawberries in it. I said, no, don't do that. You're going to have to make more passes, make sure that bed is firm and condition that will benefit that plant.
That's the better. I mean, the plastic, and you can see here.
We're just kind of setting it up for a full. What I always like to do whenever I'm bedding is take some kind of spike or screwdriver and tack that drip line down, usually fold it over, hammer it in, so you don't really have to worry about it once you take off, because it's going to pull. But if it happens to pull out and someone's not watching it, you're going to pull your drip line all the way up through there, and you can't do much without irrigation under the plastic.
We're taking short clips of this one so you can see here. Also,
How's that working, gravel and rocky ground, maybe? Not as good.
Can you make it work at your place?
Yeah, I can make it work.
Yeah.
One thing I try to do though is, I try to keep my strawberries in an area where I have the least amount of rocks.
Do they cut holes in the rocks, cut holes in the plaster?
It will, and he mentioned how do you get the drip line below the surface. I don't put it below the surface at my place, because what I found is that the applicator, for one, it pushes rocks up as it slices through, and lifts the plastic off the bed, and also it puts a lot of holes in the drip line. So at my place in particular, I put it on top. One thing I do though, we're double rowing these strawberries on these beds, and I do this on anything that I double row, because I usually have a slope, is I don't put my drip line exactly in the middle. I offset it uphill a little bit, so that top row is going to have a chance of getting potentially the same amount of water and nutrients as what the lower half of the bed will. planting strawberries, it's very important. See, this is the crown right here of the strawberry plant. You never want to bury the crown, such as this diagram shows, and you never want to have roots exposed above the soil line. However, if you're planting through plastic mulch, something that I try to do is I usually use plugs, and usually the surface of the plug is even with the crown. What I like to do is when you punch that hole and you put that plug in, I don't want to bury my crown in the soil, but I like to have my crown set a little bit below the surface of the plastic. And this is for two reasons. It's almost kind of a heat ring around that crown. And also during the winter, especially the winter like we had, and we've seen some strawberry fields, if there was a crown sticking up above the plastic, it probably got burned off or froze down. And that setting that crown down a little bit will help prevent some freeze damage. If you set it too low though, when they start to grow, it'll start growing, the leaves will come out under the plastic, and you don't want that to happen. You want it all to come out on top.
That plug will wick water faster if it's not covered with soil.
Yes,
So
sir.
your plant will dry out too fast.
This is a commercial operation, and so this is, you can see. I've noticed some runners there already with the plants. They come in later and take them off. But this guy is going behind, making sure that the plants are set properly. Otherwise, it's big. You can see, that those rows are really long, and so they have to. This requires quite, make sure that I tell homeowners the most important thing about strawberry plants, planting strawberries, is that depth. You don't want to bury the growing tip, and you don't want to expose the roots.
Like to point out here, these are commercial strawberry beds, but these are actually bigger than the standard ones. I want to say they're around 40, 42 inches across. And this particular guy is coming back. He's got a water wheel planter that's doing 2 rows at once. He's actually going to come in and put another row right in the middle. He's doing 3 rows on the same bed. And he's also, you can't really see it, but he's got double drip lines that are in about right here. And he's increased his density, I think, from probably around 16,000 plants per acre, 15 or 16 to 21 or 23,000. I don't remember exactly, but he's increased his production off the same surface area of land.
This guy is in Newport, outside of Newport, Arkansas.
So, y'all have any questions?
How many acres does he do?
About 5
5 to 7,
strawberries, 5
yeah.
to 7 strawberries. Now he does other, he does watermelons and other things, but yeah, strawberries. And I'll say for Arkansas, that's probably one of the largest growers.